Welcome back to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm Kori, your host, and I'm so excited to be back. And I'm especially grateful today to have a special guest, my dear friend Jill. She's here to share with us all of her amazing knowledge on divorce and navigating that when kids are involved. So I'm blessed and grateful to have her here with us. And we're just going to be talking about all things co parenting, navigating divorce, maybe even after divorce, as I'm still navigating that. And we both can share from our own experience as well as Jill's expertise. So, Jill, share with everyone a little bit about, tell us like how you came to be a divorce coach, kind of where your journey started, because I know there's a lot to that story. So yeah, tell us a little about yourself.
I went to law school, and when I came out, the one way that you could get to court quickly was to agree to help the more senior attorneys with the divorces, because no one wanted to deal with divorce and child custody. And so I got a lot of experience pretty early on dealing with divorce and custody cases. I eventually went on to work for a national firm that handles primarily divorces for men.
Right.
And I did a lot of litigation during that time. And one of the things that I took away from that was how destructive the litigation can be for families, and how it interferes with the communication, and it creates long-term damage to the relationships in the family. And so I wanted to find a way to maybe help people handle things a little bit better.
That is awesome. It is awesome. Yeah, divorce is not a fun process. Even I feel like if you're pretty good at leaving the kids out of that equation, it can be really challenging because there's just so many emotions involved. What would you say is the biggest obstacle or challenge parents face if they're going through divorce? Or maybe there's a couple of them that you see more commonly, or that you feel like parents need more support with. Like, I know I have some ideas on what that looks like, but I would be curious to hear your professional opinion on that.
Well, I try to draw it out for people to look in three different directions. So we want to talk about the breakup itself, which is emotional and difficult, the divorce process, which is legal and can also be intimidating to people and create a lot of fear, and then just the parenting relationship that each parent has with the kids, which is separate. And so kind of trying to separate those out and make sure that we're talking about what we should be talking about, and we're not talking about the breakup when it's really a parenting issue,
Right.
And we're not talking about the court when it's really a breakup issue that you're having again. So what are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's kind of like a roller coaster. I think one of the things I noticed, and also having been a child that experienced divorce myself, I think one of the mistakes I see parents making, and I would say in my situation on this scenario, we've been good about not doing this with our kids, so I feel good about that, but is a parent talking negatively to their children about the other parent. And what I can say when that happens is it only hurts the relationship of the parent speaking negatively. It doesn't, I don't know if we have a friend here. We have Bo. My dog just popped up in the podcast. So that is Bo. He wanted to be a part of the podcast today. But yes, so I think the biggest challenge is when a parent is speaking negatively about the other parent. Their intent is obviously they're feeling insecure in who they are. They want the kids to like them. They want the kids to want to be with them. They're seeking that validation. But what happens is by talking negatively about the other parent, it actually works to their disadvantage, because the bottom line is kids love both parents. Even if one parent has more skills or tools than the other, they want to love both parents. So it's not going to benefit the person to speak negatively. It just harms it works against them. It's harming their relationship with their child. So that's one thing I've seen. I think something I always try to keep in the forefront when I'm thinking things through in situations is just what you said. You have to remove, okay, these are emotions I have because of my 19 years of marriage with this person. That's about me. maybe I'd been sent a not awesome text, right? Maybe it was a personal text, like it was an attack on me as a person. It had nothing to do with parenting. So what do I do with that? Do I respond to it? What's the point? Do I have to relook at how boundaries are in place? So there's just, I always think about how does it benefit my child? So I try to keep the focus on the kids because we're divorced. Like we're already divorced. During the divorce process, that's tricky because you're figuring out who's going to have the kids when, what does scheduling look like, what do finances look like, who's paying for what. There's all those things. But once you get through the divorce, really it comes down to our communication needs to stick to the kids. And in my opinion, it's best if all communication is about the kids. Where I find when we run into trouble is when communication goes beyond the kids, when we are making comments about the other parent, maybe not in front of the kids, but just to the other parent. And that's not serving anyone, nor is it that person or my place to be worried about my ex-husband's personal life. It's not my place to judge his behavior. I want to assume that he's doing his best as a parent to be the best parent he can be. And I want him to assume that for me. So, yeah. So,
and I want to give everyone grace here that may be listening, because I think we've all acted in ways that we're sorry about
100%.
in our communication. And that's part of figuring out what your new relationship looks like. So I don't want anyone to feel like if there's conflict that that's not normal or they're doing a bad job. You are trying to figure things out. It's how you really repair after those conflicts and come back and decide to work towards something different or communicate in a more effective way. I think that's what your children can learn from.
100%. And I think the age of the kids makes a difference too. Like my kids are teenagers, so they are nosy. They are looking at my phone. They're trying to see what's going on. And it's hard. I don't think, because then you're a single parent trying to date.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't want to gaslight my kids. And my kids will ask questions. Like I don't know. I'm not maybe necessarily ready for them to meet somebody I just met, but navigating that whole thing, that's a whole nother thing. But we were just talking about this, Jill and I, before we started the podcast. I said, one of the things I said to my kids, I believe in being vulnerable and having humility. And I told my kids, I said, look, I've never been a mom, or a single mom dating, raising you and running a business. And I said, so I've never done all these three things before like this, and I haven't navigated this, but I want you guys to know you're my priority. So if there's ever any questions you have, if you ever feel uncomfortable about something, please come to me. I just feel like none of us truly know what we're doing when we're navigating new territory. So I try to be as transparent. That doesn't mean oversharing. My kids do not need to know everything about my personal life, but being as transparent or creating a place where they feel comfortable talking to me. And so that way, if they're noticing or seeing things, they're not questioning their own truth, which is gaslighting. If they ask me, well, are you going on a date? It doesn't mean I need to give them all the details, but I can say, yeah, I am. And we're just getting to know each other. But you don't want to say no, because then you're in essence gaslighting them, because the kids are so intuitive and so perceptive. I don't know.
They're smart. And they also know when you're struggling. So they know when you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And I like to think of it this way. There is a high percentage that your kid's going to go through a breakup. They may have a kid, and you're modeling for them vulnerability, you're modeling for them openness, you're modeling them for humility, and saying, it's okay for you to not know what you're doing in some situations, and just be honest, and we can communicate about it. So I think you're handling it perfectly.
Well, thank you. Well, I don't know about that. I don't know. I always say don't give it better for perfect. I'm just trying to do it the best.
You're handling it imperfectly perfectly.
Right. But I do. I talk about that almost on every podcast, the importance of, we've got to model what we want for our kids. Like we have to be when I do parenting classes, the first class I do, wherever I'm doing the parenting class, is how do we become the best parent we can be? By becoming the best version of ourselves. And that is so we can model healthy things for our kids. We don't want to suppress emotions. We want to recognize emotions. We want to I'll tell my kids, I had a day where I was kind of in a funk. I'm like, yeah, I'm just having a moment. I'm fine. my happiness, my emotions are not your responsibility, and I will be fine, but I'm human and I'm just having a moment. I'll be good, just sharing that. But
And I think it's important to remember when you are become single parents instead of a unit that's residing in the same home, a lot of the stressors of your day, a lot of the things that you may have been able to kind of keep from them because you had another adult in the house helping to parent, it's just going to be exposed. If you've had a bad day, there's not another parent around
to step
in. And so I think it's okay to say, I'm just having a bad day and it's not about you.
Right.
I love you very much. But you're going to see some more cracks because it's just me.
Right. No, I love that.
And I think it acknowledges the other parent's role up to that point in really helping. And, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's very different to parent in two different houses.
And I know 100%. And everybody does it their own way. And I know my kids seem to be doing good with it. I would say the thing they like the least is the going back and forth. So we try everything we've done, and we try to do it on what we are. And I know I think this, and I would say their dad thinks this too. We do it because it's best for them. But I like the days they go, like we squeeze the days together instead of like one day at mom's, 2 days at dad's, then two, like going back and forth more. We try to just group it. But we didn't want to do, some people do 1 week on, 1 week off. We didn't want to do that because I was like, that's too long. I don't want to not see my kids.
And I think one thing we talked about was, and I talk about this with my clients, try not to think of a decision you make for the schedule to be an eternity. This might be a schedule that works for you for this next semester, or if you have littles for the next year, or maybe even just until they get their driver's license. There's a lot of things that are perpetually changing in your kids' lives. And when you truly have a child-centered parenting plan, it's going to have to adapt to their changing lifestyles.
100, especially when you have kids that play sports like mine. My kids are everywhere. And we were also talking about, when you're navigating this new thing of having a personal life, running a business, like I try to schedule things for my business and my personal life when I don't have my kids. Well, my kids might still have an activity. I have mom guilt if I miss an activity, but I'm also like, that's okay. It's okay. My kids know I love them. And that's a conversation personally, I think that's because of the age of my kids. It's between me and my kids. It's not between me and their dad. I don't need to explain to their dad why I'm not there. I need to have that conversation with them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the things that I try to talk to my clients about is developing a support system besides the other parent.
Yeah.
And I think that at first maybe makes people bristle, but develop a group of friends or your own family who can help you when it's your time.
100%. Right? And I do that. I have a great group of moms, and we all help each other. And they're even married, but it's amazing. I feel blessed.
And then that way you're not, maybe you're in an argument because of something personal that's going on with the breakup or the divorce, and you're not communicating well about the parenting. So you can kind of take a step back and have your support network come in and help you and get your kids where they need to go and focus on building your life up and what it looks like now.
And you shouldn't feel bad about, I think culturally, I think we've gotten into this culture of like, we need to be there for everything for our kids. And then I think about my own childhood that maybe was the kind of, my parents were there, but they weren't at everything. And I wasn't upset. I don't think my daughter's gonna go, when she's 20 years old, Mom missed my basketball game. I always have a conversation with them. And if it's an important or a championship game, of course I'm going to be there if I can, but things come up. It's hard to manage it all. I think parents need to have some grace for themselves when they can't be at something. And when you were talking about child center, I know this is something we do. When you get divorced, usually the holidays, they do odd and even years. Well, every family has traditions, right? So, we got that sheet. We talked about it. And I said, I'm not okay switching Christmas. I don't know how. And I asked my ex-husband, I said, how do you feel about that? And I said, what I would like to see is I don't care if I get them Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, but we each get to see them. We just won't travel on Christmas. If you want to travel, you go and come back on Christmas Eve, or you leave on Christmas Day, or we just talk about it beforehand. And I will say, he and I have worked really well on that, because that's one holiday we both, and not because it's about me, but I know my kids would want to see him and me. Like, they would not be happy if they couldn't see me, and they wouldn't be happy if they couldn't see him on that holiday. And whereas like Thanksgiving, his family always gets together, they get to see their cousins. They go with him every Thanksgiving. I'm fine. I think we need to be okay. I think oftentimes parents aren't child centered. They're thinking about their need. Like, well, it's my Thanksgiving. Whereas I'm thinking, I don't want to take the opportunity for my kids to see their cousins away. I'll be fine. I'm great. I don't have family here, but this year I went home to see my family, or I have family that are like friends. I have plenty of places I can go for Thanksgiving. And in my mind, I'm like, it's just a day. It's just a day.
You're also going to get the information. I joke with my clients sometimes that your mom is going to want one thing, your friends are going to say one thing, your attorney is going to say you can get this, your therapist is going to ask you what you feel about that. So I think it's good to have a thinking partner sometimes to say, you know what, yes, we could absolutely litigate this. You could talk to your attorney and go to court, and we could do every other year. Or you could talk to your best friends who are mad and want to make sure that you get whatever, you feel like you should get. Sometimes it's good to just take a step back and think of this person that you're co-parenting with as someone that you share a lot with. You shared a lot of memories. You shared your kids with. We want to alchemize what was a marriage or a relationship into hopefully a friendship, so that you guys can enjoy your kids and continue to parent them past 18.
Right.
And I think what you're talking about is exactly that. What is best for our family and traditions moving forward?
Right.
Because once the kids are 18 or graduated from high school, they're really navigating a relationship with you guys independently without a third party involved. Mm-hmm. And you're training them to do that now. What does it look like to have a relationship with me?
I love that.
What does it look like to have a relationship with your dad?
Right.
And when you set traditions like that, it makes it easier for them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that is so true. And yeah, my son started driving, got his own car this summer, which changed, he's popping over. He's here all, like, it's just, he comes whenever he wants, which is great. My child's always welcome. But it's interesting too, because I'm like, oh, we also maybe need to establish some boundaries with that. So I tell him, I'm like, you can come here, but let me know ahead of time. Let me know. And that's not because it's of anything negative. It's just, I might have a friend over and I'm not ready for that person to meet my child. So it's actually to protect my child. So that's a whole nother, all the things you get to learn to navigate.
Well, we live in an interesting time because a lot of people have divorced parents, or they remember what it was like and some of the confusion or the complication they have. And I think that actually makes it easier sometimes, because you remember what you did not like or what you appreciated, and you can incorporate that into your co-parenting schedules. And I do agree with you. Once they turn 16 or get their driver's license, it's a completely different animal, because you're dividing time between you and the other parent, but also school and sports and
social
friends. Mm-hmm. Friends.
Yes, I know there's kids in my house all the time, but I love that. I do love that. Yes. So many challenges. Okay. So what would be, if you were going to give a couple a piece of advice in navigating this, like what would be, do you think, a couple things you would recommend that they focus on? I know I talked about just not speaking negatively about the other parent, because we have in my own circumstance, there's times we're sitting together at the swim meet. There's times we're not even looking at each other, and it's a roller coaster. And we're just navigating that.
And I would, like I said, give yourself grace for that. I think something counterintuitive maybe that I talk about is you don't have to necessarily go to court immediately if you've decided you want to get divorced or you want to do something different with your lives. You can start practicing some of these things at home. So you might say, listen, I think Friday night should be your night. You're in charge of the kids. I'm going to go to my friend's house or my mom's house and just start maybe doing some practice runs, because that is really difficult for a lot of traditional families where maybe one parent stays at home and one parent works, because that dynamic almost inevitably changes.
So interesting you say that, because I think in my dynamic, so I worked and then I was home for 5 years. Then I worked at the kids' school. So my schedule was their schedule. So it was perceived, I mean, I was the primary caregiver of the kids. And what I noticed is when I got divorced, my ex-husband travels for work. He's like, well, I have to travel. Well, now I'm starting a business. I have a schedule too. And I don't see that being taken into consideration. Like I'll share this. We had an example because of my son drives. And so he gets the kids 2 days one week, 4 days the next week. And when it's his first night to take the kids, he oftentimes is traveling back in town. Well, I reached out to him. I said, my son had a practice late. My daughter had a practice that night because, we're trying to coordinate. So if I know I have the kids, I coordinate all that. Well, I messaged him, hey, I just want to make sure or see what time you're going to get, your daughter so she can eat before she goes to breakfast. And this is like 4 o'clock and I have plans because I don't have the kids. And then he responded, well, can you feed her? I'm not going to be back till 7 or 7:30. So, and again, that was the dynamic in the marriage, I think. So what would be a good way if you're in a situation? So I feel like there's this expectation that can still be the dynamic, but the difference is I'm not your wife anymore. This is your responsibility on your night. So I have to be really hardcore. I've gotten really good at boundaries. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like, I feel like boundaries is a struggle for a lot of people.
Well, I think women feel like they are doing a disservice to their child by setting a boundary that's important to them. And this goes back to what we talked about before about modeling. And I think you think about, if my daughter came to me in this situation, would I want her to set a boundary? And you would.
Yes.
And so you're modeling that for her. And I am being gender specific here only because I find that men do not seek out the support systems as early as women do. And they also don't really have them in place the way that we do. And so there's going to be a little bit of a transition time, but sometimes the only way for the parent who has not developed a support network to help him or her is to just set the boundary and say, you might have a rough night, or my kid may not get fed as quickly as I would have done it if it were with me.
And in this circumstance, to your point, it's like, I don't want my child to suffer because of the dysfunction in our co-parenting in that moment. So what I did is I responded and said, in the future, I will make sure she gets fed tonight. And what that looks like is me getting DoorDash, having her DoorDash food, because I have to be somewhere in an hour. Like, I'm getting ready and I'm going to be gone because I didn't intend on having the kids. So in the future, I need 2 to 3 days notice. So I'm prepared and I can plan for that. And it was interesting because he responded and said, well, there's no guarantees. I can't guarantee that. And I responded, I said, that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to go back in. So this is a constant process and just establish a clear boundary with that. And I don't know, I'm still contemplating what that looks like. But again, I'm not going to not feed my kid or make sure my kid gets fed. It might not look how I want, but
I think it's important when you are in this stage of figuring out how you're going to do life to just take everything as data collection. You're not making a mistake. You're not doing,
I love that.
You're just collecting data so that you can continue to get better in your communication and your relationship.
Yeah. And one thing I do, I've had my kids call before, and I'm sure they, like, I've had kids will manipulate the situation too. Like, because my son the other night, I told him I was going to take his phone. I said, if you can't give me your attention and speak respectfully, then I'll just hold your phone for you. And I wasn't mad. And he's like, oh, Mom, I'm just going to go to Dad's. I imagine some parents, that could go a couple different ways. When my kids do that, I'm like, by all means, you can go to Dad's, but I'll hold the phone. Like, you're not going to manipulate because you don't like the consequence at my house. We don't run to dad's. And I'm also not going to get mad. I think a lot of parents take it personal. They take, and I mean, I'm sorry if you have teenagers, I mean, they are not friendly. My daughter, basically, I love her, but she growls at me. I mean, she's like, what, mom? And I think parents just need to know it's harder because you're going through divorce too, and you have this whole new dynamic, and you have hormonal teenagers. But I think the key is just to know they're hormonal teenagers. They would be that way whether you were married or divorced, and to not take it personal. And I've had it twice where my son was mad at the consequence and said he was going to dad's. And I said, I love you. And I said, by all means, if you feel like you need to go to dad's, you can call him and ask. But I'm still going to hold your phone, and I'll be happy to drive it over to dad or make sure dad gets it. So I just think staying very calm, not taking it personal, and not allowing kids or parents to manipulate. You don't want that. That doesn't serve your child. That doesn't help your child. And I know you have kids too, so you've experienced
yeah.
all these things. And yeah, teenage emotions. Woohoo.
The example I usually give of that is my mom and dad have been married for 53 years. They live in the same house I grew up with my sister. And I remember when I was a teenager, I would ask for maybe permission to stay out later or go to a concert. And they would break away from me, go to their room, shut the door, and talk, and then come out with kind of a joint plan for what's going to happen. And my mom later told me we had the biggest arguments behind those doors because we had such different ideas about what you should be allowed to do and shouldn't. But it was important to us to have a united front. So I want you to imagine that. And then now you have two people who have beef with each other, maybe on the breakup and the divorce front, and they're in separate houses, and they already have separate visions for how these kids should be parented. Necessarily, you're going to have differences of opinion.
100%. And I think most of the times their dad and I will come together on major things, but I've had my kids call and ask permission to do things when they're with him. And I'm like, you need to talk to dad. This is not my decision in this moment. And I think it's hard for some parents to let go of having that control. Here's what I do know. Whether I get along all the time with their dad and things are perfect between us, not necessarily. They're not perfect right now. They're not perfect. But
to be honest, they wouldn't be perfect if you were together.
Correct. So, well, there's never perfect. Right. Perfect is an unattainable goal.
It is.
But they're not awesome right now. We'll say that. They're not awesome. They could be better. But I know two things about their dad. Their dad loves them unconditionally, and their dad would not do anything to harm them. So I'm just going to trust that he's going to make the decision that's right based on the circumstances and the information he has. Am I always going to agree with it? Maybe not, but it's not my place to judge it. If it's coming from a good place, I'm just going to trust that because I do know those two things. And I think it's a struggle often. It's taken me a long time to get there. I'm not saying I have always thought this way, or even when we were married, but just trusting in that and seeing that that's best for the kids.
So I love that. And here's a little tool that I use. It's API, assume positive intent.
Oh.
And so count 1, 2, 3, assume positive intent, API, when you start to get frustrated, when you get that text, when you get that phone call or the message, assume positive intent, assume positive intent, which is just what you said, that the other parent loves the kid, would never do anything to harm them.
Right.
And whether or not you agree with what's happening or not, API.
And when my kids call and complain, so there's been times my son or daughter will call and complain about dad, right? I'm sure they complain about me to him. So he is a great dad. But they'll call and complain about something. I don't use that as an opportunity to bash their dad again. I'm like, half the time, I'm like, tell me more about it. I think we need to pause. I think what happens is when emotions are involved, they're like, oh, this is a time for me to look good and make them look bad. And we really don't want to go down that path. I think it's a great time to pause and ask for more information. So tell me about that. Why was dad upset? Usually 9 times out of 10, I'm like, well, yeah, I wouldn't have been happy with that choice either. So my child probably did something that was not appropriate or that does need a consequence, whatever that might be. I'm on board with why he's upset. Do I agree with how he's handling it? Maybe not always. So then I just coach my kids. I'm like, well, here's what I'd recommend based on I know dad. I think you need to listen. I'm not in disagreement. I'm not saying I agree with everything that's going on, but And I hear you not liking his approach, but you are not right in this. You've made a poor choice. I agree that it's a poor choice. So you need to sit and listen. I always tell my kids, I'm like, sit and listen, hear what dad has to say. He wants to be heard, and then ask for permission to share your perspective or to interject or whatever. Ask for permission, but you need to listen, because I have one that he's my child. He's more concerned. I've grown into it in adulthood. I've gotten much better at this, but he's so focused on what he wants to say, he's not listening.
That's another thing to remember about teenagers is
they're egocentric.
I tell my kids, no one thinks about you as much as
you think about you. I say that all the time. That's adults too.
Mhm.
Like we obsess, like, have you ever gotten dressed and you're like, gosh, what did I wear to the last meeting? Did I wear the same thing? And then I tell myself, do I remember what anyone else was wearing? No, no one's going to remember. No one thinks about me as much as I think about me. I mean, that's just human nature. We are egocentric by nature.
And especially teenagers that don't have their frontal cortex.
Yeah, they're not developed.
We as parents can't control the narrative for them. We can't tell them one thing. And it's not like when they were 5 and we would explain the world around them and they would believe us. They're experiencing this on their own. And so to be confident enough to let your teenagers have a little space to figure out the dynamic is really scary, but it's really efficacious in the end, because then they come to these understandings on their own.
Well, and we even gave the kids, I mean, ultimately, you're the parent, you make decisions, but I think it's great asking kids questions, because it does get them to go to the processing centers. They have to think, they have to process. So I'm always asking my kids questions. Like I'm asking my kids questions like if if they feel comfortable about this particular situation, or in an ideal world, what would you want the schedule to look like? That doesn't mean I'm giving them the power to change the schedule, but it gives me context for where they're at, what they like, what they don't, what's hard for them. And I have 2 different kids that struggle in 2 different ways. And I also see that they might share, well, this is the schedule I would want, but maybe dad wouldn't like that, or mom wouldn't like that. They're thinking about, divorce is hard. Some of that burden does fall on them, where our kids love us even when they're teenagers and growl at you, but they do care about our feelings, and they're old enough to understand that. And it's good to have empathy, but I'm real big on my emotions. My happiness is not your responsibility. That doesn't mean you can be mean and, be disrespectful to me. I have a standard for how I expect to be treated, but it's not your job. You didn't choose this, because this is another thing I see is when parents get remarried or get into a relationship, maybe it's a long-term relationship with somebody, the child forms a bond with that person. And now maybe that doesn't work out. I had this happen when I was growing up. My mom was married to my stepdad for a long time, and I maintain that relationship with him to this day. Is it what it was then? No, but I still have a relationship with him. And she didn't like that at first. And I understand that. But I think as parents, we need to step back like, well, wait, the child didn't choose for that person to come in their life. And it's not their fault that didn't work out. So why are we putting that burden, or why are we putting them in that position? I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
I think kids cannot have too many people love them.
Yeah.
And so the more people that are in their lives that know them, that love them, that have their best interests at heart, the better they are. Now, your relationship with these people may not be fantastic, and that's part of divorce, but that doesn't necessarily affect the reciprocity the child has with the other person.
Right. No, 100%. Because I think about that too. So I think it's good for parents if they start dating. Do you want to bring every person you date into their life? No. But if you have teenagers, it gets like, my kids are here all the time. It's hard to, I'm pretty transparent, and I'm just like, and I say things like, they're a friend, we're just getting to know each other. It takes time. And again, modeling what building a healthy relationship looks like. And just, modeling it as best we can.
And I think we get things stuck in our heads, maybe from the 70s or the 90s, as facts. You can have friends and introduce your kids to people. You can choose not to.
Right.
I don't think there's one way to handle anything.
100%.
You are the expert in your kids, right?
Yeah.
You know your kids better than anybody else. So you know what a good way to present things to them
It's
would be.
funny because my kids are real like giddy and curious about it. And
Yeah.
it's funny. And then they'll ask me things like about their dad. And I'm like, you need to talk to dad about that.
Because they're getting ready to date too. Like they're, teenagers want to know, they want to get as much information as possible because
right.
they are starting to enter that world as well. Um, it's been a bonding experience with me and my kids in a way. Like, just what does it look like to go out into the world and meet new people
Right.
and make decisions about them and bring them into your life and integrate them?
And I can't imagine because I'm gonna, eventually when our kids meet people that maybe they want to marry, I'm like, or that they want to marry down the road, I'm like, wow, I haven't really thought about that yet.
I know, right?
It's crazy. All
We
the
have
things.
the you love him, I love him, you hate him, I hate him. That's our rule in our house. So other parents may handle it differently, but I'm like, whatever you want to do right now is fine. I'm team you.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I think when you fight your kids on certain things and you focus on it too much, if it's something, maybe it's something they're wearing, maybe it's a hairstyle, all you're doing is perpetuating the behavior. I will tell you that I had red hair at one point in my life and it was not a good look, but I kept it longer because I knew my mom didn't like it. And I did. I intentionally kept it longer and I knew it was awful. So I can speak to that.
Yes.
So yes. So when we push back, when we try to force or impose, I think we're just perpetuating the thing we don't want. Whatever we focus on, we get more of. So we really need to have the positive intent. And I'm reading Mel Robbins' new book. I love Mel Robbins. Let Them. I highly recommend that book. And I'm not even through it yet, but I knew I would love it. But it's so good. And I love how simplistic her messaging is, how simple the tools she offers are to implement. But really, it's about let them. And she says in the book, let them and let me. And I love that because it's the let me part. It's like, let them say or think. I think often too, when you go through divorce, it's hard. I say, don't take things personal. You shouldn't care about what other people think. You care about what people think about you that you care about. So it's hard when you're going through a divorce and what you say about the person you're divorcing. So they're saying stuff about you to their family, to their friends. And it's hard not to wonder. But when I start to think about that, and I'm a people pleaser by nature, so I want to control that narrative, right? But then I don't. I stop caring. I'm like, I can't care. I can't care about that. I'm like, people that know me know me. People that want to believe or get in the God, like those aren't my people.
And be gentle with yourself. Reframe that. I care. I recognize that I care, but I also recognize that I can't do anything to control
Correct.
it.
And I don't try to. And old me would have tried to.
Yeah. And feeling like you care, that's natural. That's human. You don't want people to speak poorly of you.
Right.
And just allowing yourself to have hurt feelings is okay.
I love that. And something I tell my kids all the time is just because I ask them, I don't tell them. I say, they'll come home and say, well, this person said this or made this comment. And I'll say, does that make it true? And they'll say, no. I'm like, just because someone says something or thinks something, that doesn't mean it's true. So anyway, okay. So tell us, Jill.
Sure.
So we're in Kansas City. I'm in Leawood, and you're in Leawood too now.
Yes.
So tell us if somebody wants, so who's your ideal customer? Obviously, people going through divorce, but how do they get in touch with you or find you? And then I will put your contact information in the show notes.
That would be great. The best way to get a hold of me is through my website, Best Consulting KC. So my last name is Best, and I am the best. So Best Consulting KC works out. And I just tell people I'm kind of a soft place to land. I do 30-minute phone initial consultations to just kind of figure out what your specific dynamic is and what ways I can help you. It's a little bit different than a therapist because it's more practical about divorce itself. And it's not legal because I'm trying to talk to you about maybe what resources you have available to you. Because of my experience in the legal community, it's easy for me to recommend good fits for people based on their personality. And so website would be great.
Awesome. Well, I will be sure to put your contact information in the show notes, and I so appreciate your time. And personally, Jill has been super helpful to me when I was navigating my divorce. So I can speak from personal experience, and we've been friends a long time. I laugh. I have to share this because it's so sweet. My daughter I laugh. She has a new little collection of stuffed animals, but her one childhood stuffed animal Jill brought to her in the hospital when she was 3 years old. It's the
remember.
only one she still has from childhood. Crazy. So, and my daughter is 14 now. So crazy, crazy. So, well, thank you for coming on. I so
I
appreciate
was
it.
so happy to be on. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you. All right. And